The other one's out here somewhere there, look. It's actually really weird looking at them. They actually feel a lot closer than they look on the camera. They actually feel like they're right there, like maybe 300 or 400 meters off the deck. It's actually a bit creepy, especially this fucker. What's he doing? Look at him. Just sitting up there. I've just checked on my Apple Watch to see if it's a constellation that I missed, but it's not. And then this little bastard's sort of over here, heading away.
The Pentagon has released 2 new videos, both of which were filmed in the last 12 months, and one of them is still unexplained. And frankly, I'm not too certain about AARO's explanation as far as the other one is concerned. But also, coming up after the latest from the Pentagon, I have a sighting that took place on February 1st, 2023 in Australia, which has attracted my attention. And now that I'm going to be visiting Australia in September, hopefully, I'm hoping to follow up on this sighting to speak directly to the witness who apparently has been researching UFOs for a while to see what else I can find out. All of this and more coming up on the latest Angry Alien Bulletin right now. Good afternoon, alien enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin. As suggested in the intro to this video, the Pentagon has released new footage, 2 new videos actually, one of which is unexplained, and also they've released a lot of new data about UAP sightings this year in 2025. The morphology of these objects, the mundane explanations for some of them, but of course, not all of them have been explained. And in addition to that, the data suggests that there are dozens of UFOs that have been detected in space, mostly by the FAA, by commercial airline pilots who have observed these objects well above their altitude, and they're estimating them to be in the 100,000 foot range or 30,000 meters or so, something along those lines. But there are other sightings that have nothing to do with that, also involving UAPs in space. We're going to be looking into that in detail, at the footage that is unexplained, as well as the stuff that AARO says that they have explained, to see whether or not their explanation matches up with the facts. And then finally, we're going to be talking about a 2023 sighting in Australia. As my trip to Australia gets closer and closer, I'd like to find out as much as I can about this whole phenomenon in Australia, which seems to have quite a lot of sightings associated with it, a lot of hotspots, a lot of UFO outbreaks, and of course, the most famous UFO sighting in Australia, indeed one of the most famous UFO sightings, period, in 1966, involving hundreds of high school students that I intend to be investigating there as well. So we'll be bringing you the latest evidence from space, from the Middle East, and from Australia. So AARO just released their latest UAP morphology data for all of the reports that they have received for a considerable period of time. Actually, we're dating this all the way back to 1996, meaning that they must have researched a lot of previous military projects associated with UAPs, as well as their own current data. So here's the morphology that we have thus far, and most of this should not be all that surprising. Over 74% of all UAP sightings have a morphology of either being lights or some sort of orb or sphere of some kind. So pretty similar descriptions for more than 3/4 of the sightings. Then ovals are only 4.2%, cylinders being 5.9%, discs, interestingly enough, comprising only 1.5% of the sightings, then triangles being 3.6%, squares or oblong polygons with 2.9%, tic-tacs only 1.1%, then you have a boomerang-shaped object, 0.4% falling into that category, and then finally 6.1% falling into the other category. And as you can see from this 1959 footage, lights and orbs are not a new thing. That's probably been the most consistent morphology for UAPs, even dating back to a time when satellites were extremely unusual, and certainly there were no flying orbs of any kind in our skies back then. As most of you probably know if you've been watching my channel for some time, I like to try to find corresponding sightings and corresponding footage with similar morphologies that date back to the 1950s and 60s. Now, there's quite a few closed cases up to this point, and here are the resolution outcomes. Overall, 50.2% of the resolutions are balloons. Very, very common mundane object that gets misidentified as a UAP. And then satellites are 36.3% of the closed cases. That means 86.5% of all resolutions are either balloons or satellites, meaning that if you have an object that changes its trajectory or flies against the wind, it cannot be either of these objects, which rules out a lot of mundane explanations. Then you have the UAS or drones, 6.5%, birds 2.5%, missiles or rockets 0.7%, aircraft only 1.7% are closed cases involving aircraft. It's not nearly as common as one might think. Then you have 0.1% is ordnance, 1.5% is jetpacks, 0.1% is lasers, and 0.2% sensor artifacts. Incidentally, you may notice that none of the closed cases involve the planet Venus. But in my opinion, one of the most intriguing new data sets provided by AARO is in regards to UAP altitudes, because for the first time they are talking about space. 17.7% of all UAP sightings take place at under 10,000 feet, 24.2% with 15,000 feet or under, 29% at 20,000 feet or under, 10% at 25,000 feet or under, 8.2% at 30,000 feet or under, 4.8% at 35,000 feet or under, 2.2% at 40,000 feet or under, and then we get down to the less than 1% of reported cases at very high altitudes, with 0.9%, interestingly enough, taking place at 45,000, 50,000, 55,000, and 60,000 feet or under. And then finally, the space domain. Only 0.4% of all sightings taking place at higher than 60,000 feet, and that still amounts to a large number of sightings. 74 of these cases were submitted by the FAA, and there's a grand total of 81 sightings that have been reported in the space domain total, 62 of which have been explained apparently, leaving 19 unexplained cases in the space domain region. And apparently this is serious enough for AARO to have created a space domain awareness team specifically assigned to deal with UAP sightings in the space domain region. Okay, with all of that having been said, 19 unresolved cases in space alone, and this again is just according to AARO, we also need to have a look at the most recent footage that they've released. Let's have a look at the one they say they've explained, and their explanation sounds reasonable, but there's a couple things about this footage that bothered me. According to AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office received a report from a U.S. military service consisting of 1 minute and 36 seconds of full motion video footage captured by a camera aboard a U.S. military platform in the Middle East in 2024. According to the reporting service, this recording likely depicts a slow-moving spheroidal object. AARO assesses with high confidence that the object depicted in this video is almost certainly, with a greater than 95% likelihood, of a consumer-grade reflective foil balloon. AARO bases its assessment on the object's strong morphological consistency with other resolved imagery depicting balloons and its behavioral correlation with recorded wind speed and direction during the event. And yes, I would say that this is probably the case, but there's a couple of occasions during this footage where all of a sudden the trajectory and velocity of this object seems to shift. You see that? These sudden movements that it makes. And as you can see, the terrain beneath the UAP is moving at a very consistent speed. So the platform is tracking this object very consistently, and there could be some variations in wind speed, that sort of thing. But then again, these sudden shifts in speed, the sudden shifts in trajectory, again, not all that significant, but still a little strange for a balloon moving with the wind. And if it's just the motion of the platform twisting the camera or something, that means that the terrain should shift, and yet it doesn't. Let's compare this with a Mylar balloon, a get well soon Mylar balloon that also was released into the atmosphere and filmed by a drone. As you can see, just very, very different indeed. As you can see, this balloon is well above the terrain that might have some sort of impact on wind currents, and yet look at it twist and move around. The wind is just not cooperating very much and allowing this balloon to move consistently and swiftly in the same direction. As a matter of fact, it's very easy for the drone to catch up with the balloon and to actually film the writing on it. But all of that being the case, we definitely could have stronger wind currents at a higher altitude or something along those lines. But if that is indeed the case, and variations in the wind are causing this object to shift its trajectory or position as far as the reconnaissance drone is concerned, then why doesn't it twist in the wind like the other balloon does? In any event, kind of hard to say, but AARO's probably right about this. I'm just not 100% convinced. But let's have a look at the unexplained footage. As you can see, this is an image that was captured by a thermal camera, and let's read a little bit more about the incident. Again, it's from the Middle East in 2024. Quote, "The All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office received a report from a U.S. military service consisting of 6 minutes and 42 seconds of video footage from an infrared sensor aboard a military platform. The recording, captured in the Middle East in 2024, depicts an apparent thermal contrast within the sensor's field of view. The area of apparent contrast exhibited characteristics that may be consistent with the presence of a physical object. However, due to the absence of corroborating telemetry or multimodal sensor data, AARO cannot determine whether the observed signature represents a sensor artifact or a thermal emission or reflection from a physical source. The available data does not support a conclusive analytic evaluation." Now, whatever this thing is, it's very, very far away from the reconnaissance platform, and it doesn't get the best of close-up views. As a matter of fact, I have the image enhanced as it is. So as you can see, though, look at how fast it moves all of a sudden just back and forth across the camera's field of view with rather sudden changes in trajectory and speed. All of that being the case, though, it's pretty clear that AARO does not regard this object as being a balloon or a typical mundane object, probably because it's traveling against the wind. If this thing were traveling consistently with reported wind direction and velocity on that day, I would say AARO would probably explain it away as being a balloon of some kind. So since this thing is, as I said before, weaving all over the camera's perspective, and given the fact that it can be tracked on a thermal sensor, I would say that this would have to be some sort of craft in flight. Boy, look at it weave all over the camera's field of view. Again, These sorts of things I find to be interesting because these sorts of platforms are designed to track objects and to keep them right in those crosshairs. And when an object doesn't cooperate, it gives the impression, at least as far as I'm concerned, of an object that's intentionally trying to avoid being tracked. And eventually, as you can see, it does settle down, and eventually the platform can track it and get a slightly better close-in view of the object in the later portions of this footage. Now, as far as morphology is concerned, what we appear to be looking at is a double object. Two spheres or two orbs traveling side by side. But once again, if you're talking about a thermal image, that's a very tricky thing. I've seen thermal images that appear to split in two or to be comprised of two objects traveling side by side, but really what it is a single object with a reflection or sort of a mirror image or shadow in the thermal resolution. So when it comes down to it, I think it could be a mistake to try to figure out the morphology of this object based on this one very distant thermal sensor image. All of that being the case, though, it's still very compelling footage, very intriguing, and as of right now, unidentified. So now let's move on to this relatively recent UFO sighting in Australia. On February 1st, 2023, what was once a casual hobby for Clark Watson suddenly became very real when he had a mind-blowing experience of his own. A real estate agent from Albury in northern New South Wales was staying at a hotel in Wyong, and I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, north of Sydney to attend a training course when he had what he claims was an up-close and personal sighting. It was around 9:30 p.m. when, according to Mr. Watson, he watched a white, blinking light come in from several kilometers out over the ocean, moving in a way that was impossible to explain before being joined by a second light. The objects darted around the sky and buzzed over the town at incredible speed. They chased each other around the sky like dogs at a park, he said. These things instantly go from standing still to the other side of the sky. The objects came in over Tuggerah Lake from what he estimated to be around 1,500 feet, then swooped down to the ground probably as low as 200 to 300 feet. Quote, "They came in over the top of my hotel," he said. "I could have hit them with an arrow. They came in and formed a Ferris wheel in the sky and had a strange interaction with another one." A 3-minute mobile phone video that you're watching right now, filmed from his balcony, shows several indistinct, flickering white lights moving around the sky. "Wow," he says, "it's kind of like a big pinwheel rotating around itself. That is the wildest thing I've ever seen." At one point, 2 lights are seen dancing around each other near the third solid bright white light which does not move before heading back the way they came. "One's just sitting there," he says, referring to the third object. "What's he doing? It's actually a bit creepy. Look at him, just sitting up there." The short excerpt from the full sighting roughly shows about 10% of what I could actually see with the naked eye, he noted in the video description. "The ones I saw were just bright white. Very different white to a star," he said. "A lot brighter than the stars. The brightest thing in the night sky. Crystal clear objects darted around the sky." And about an hour later, Mr. Watson saw a triangle come in from the ocean. It was about an acre in size. It was huge, he said. "It just hovered at an altitude of about 400 feet. I had no idea what it was. It was absolutely mind-blowing to witness it. It was like nothing I'd ever seen on Earth. My mind couldn't categorize it." He added the giant triangle, which had dim lights on the corners, was not bright like the earlier objects, and looked organic. "It looked like snakeskin, charcoal, and brown," he said. "Although I have to admit, I'd like to ask Mr. Watson why he didn't get any footage of that triangular object, but we'll continue." Mr. Watson said he's long been interested in the topic, but it wasn't until 2023, after 20 years of being a researcher, that I had my own really profound experience, and I saw an object up close. That changed everything for me, he said. It became very real to me. It was here, it was active, and that's when I really got involved. The strange sighting inspired Mr. Watson to sign up as a volunteer field researcher with the Australian chapter of the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, the US-based nonprofit which collects reports of UFO sightings around the world. I suppose maybe I ought to become a member of that organization. I suppose this could be a collection of drones. That would be one possibility, although drones should be audible, especially flying over a lake. They shouldn't be stealth drones in an encounter like this, and also there's several of them and not just one or two. They can't be satellites. They would be tracking across the sky in a much different fashion if they were satellites, and also there wouldn't be a blinking orb moving in conjunction with a grouping of satellites. So a very intriguing sighting, and once again, it's a sighting I hope to learn something more about from Mr. Watson when I visit Sydney in person this September. So stay tuned for a few more details about that.
That is fucking wild. There's two of them, look. They're dancing around. Fuck. That's right here above the hotel. Look at them. Fuck, that's mental.
So once again, I find it refreshing that AARO is finally releasing footage that they have not yet explained. Apparently, I think that's probably as a result of congressional representatives who have been pressuring them to do this. They've been expressing some frustration as of late with AARO's reports that they have footage of UAPs conducting anomalous behavior or anomalous maneuvers, things that are inconsistent with our technology or inconsistent at least with conventional aircraft or drones or balloons, that sort of thing, and yet they don't release any of it to the public. But at last, they finally are. I've already released one video about one of these pieces of footage, and then the other one. Also, as you saw today, very interesting stuff, and once again, at least currently, remaining unexplained. And then this Australian case, I think that there is a whole new world of this phenomena waiting for me in the Southern Hemisphere. Really looking forward to checking into that. And once again, to give you a quick update, kind of stalled at the 35% mark. Just an amazing collection of supporters, almost 30 donors at this point who have contributed to getting me to that 35% mark. But we've kind of been a little stalled as of late, although I don't find that to be surprising at all, given the fact that I just rolled this out a few days ago. It's amazing that people have contributed as much as they have in such a short amount of time. But nevertheless, if you would like to see this trip happen, if you want to make sure that I go to Australia in September of this year, all the details are in the description. You can go to my GoFundMe link, and I also have that linked in the comments, or you can support me on Patreon or just purchase a piece of merchandise. And while I'm thanking the high-flying donors who have made all of this happen, I need to recognize one person in particular who has donated so much to my channel over the years, and because of his very generous donation to this particular fundraiser, that's what made it possible for me to reserve my flight to Australia. His name is David Hender, and he usually asks to remain anonymous. However, recently he's been going through some health struggles and has just been in the hospital for 11 days. I thought it might brighten his day a little bit if I recognized him publicly, and he agreed to allow me to do this. Thank you, David Hender. You are a legend. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.